Please can you remind me if you'll be so kind, staring out into space, asking God to hear my case, trying to think of all things past. How long will my memory last? The purple angel, purple angel, purple angel, you're next to me.
Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to Alzheimer Speaks Radio. I'm Lori LeBay, the host and founder of Alzheimer Speaks, and I started the company because my mother had dementia for 30 years, and I absolutely adore my job. I think I'm the luckiest person in the world. You see, we had a really hard time finding services, products, and tools, and just general information and education about Alzheimer's disease and dementia symptoms in general. And so here at Alzheimer Speaks, we are an advocacy-based company trying to provide multiple platforms to shift our dementia care from crisis to comfort around the world. We also help companies expand their brand footprint by leveraging our platforms and content so that people can find what those service products and tools are out there and make their lives a little bit easier. I also want to thank our audience. You see, your likes, your clicks, your shares has just really broadened our audience so much, and I just can't thank you enough. It has been an amazing ride for Alzheimer Speaks to be recognized by Oprah and Maria Shriver and AARP and Dr. Oz, and that's not us, that's all of us. They're hearing that this is a needed avenue, a channel that people can come and find resources and comfort. We're not out here to fix anybody. We're just here to help support one another. So again, thank you for your likes, your clicks, and your shares. And I hope that you will continue to share our episodes and our blog posts and our videos in the future. I'd also like to invite you to be our next guest. You see, here on Alzheimer Speaks Radio, we want to hear everyone's voice. So if you're living with dementia and have a story to tell or an experience you want to share, please let us know. Maybe you're a family member caring for a loved one. Maybe you are a professional like we have with us today that is doing some really cool work and you want to share it and get your information out. And you might be a researcher, an author, a movie director, an advocate. Everyone is welcome. So just go to alzheimerspeaks.com. That's our main website, and click on the contact button in the upper right-hand corner. And I would love to talk with you about your journey and your experience and what you would like to see changed in the world of dementia. Now, before I introduce our guest, and we're going to be talking about art therapy today, I just want to give a shout out to a couple of organizations. The first one is called the Roberto app, and it's really cool because it measures brain function. And this is something anybody at any age can track. So you can go to our website again at alzheimerspeaks.com, look for the big banner ad on the right-hand side and click on it, and you can even get an extended trial for the app. You'll play some video games, and it will measure what your scores are. And it's really interesting because, maybe your brain isn't functioning as well, but it might trigger you to think, what have you done different? Maybe you have a cold like I do. Maybe you didn't get much sleep. Maybe you're under a lot of stress. Maybe you just started a new medication. All of those things can contribute to having a healthy brain and will affect how our brain functions. And so this is something you can track. If you're seeing a decline, maybe you're going to want to bring this information to the doctor or try monitoring your lifestyle and see if that will change and get your score back up. Also, the Care to Plan resource directory, I love that concept of both clinicians and families being able to find and share resources. And if you go to, again, alzheimerspeaks.com, click on our resource directory button, you'll learn more about it. It's still in beta testing, but you'll get a real good feel for it, and you can become part of that too. And then last I want to shout out to is Maria Shriver. She just does such wonderful work. And she has an organization called a Women's Alzheimer's Movement, which also does Move for Minds, which is an event she does every summer. And you can find her by going to the Women's Alzheimer's Movement.org, the Women's Alzheimer's Movement.org. She is really interested in helping push research forward to see why more women than men are getting dementia. So let me go ahead and introduce our guest today. I'm very excited to introduce her because I just recently met her when I was out west doing some training for Aegis Living. And Jael Weinberg is an art therapist, and she has her master's from New York University. She incorporates really creative processes in many forms into therapeutic work with her residents at Aegis Living, which where she works is an all-memory care community called Callahan Place. So welcome, Jael. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Lori.
Well, thanks for spending the time with us today. I was really impressed when I was out to visit and got a chance to talk with you about your work, and thought it would be a great opportunity to have you on the show and share with others what you're doing. But before we get into our line of questions, I always like to ask our guests if they have been personally touched by dementia, maybe in their own circle of friends or family.
Yeah, so my great aunt on my dad's side developed dementia later in her life. And that was kind of my first real adult experience connecting with a loved one with dementia. And my mom's dad, my grandpa, had Parkinson's disease with some elements of dementia as well. So I've experienced it a little bit in my personal life, but the majority of my work as an art therapist thus far has been with individuals with dementia. So I've been around it for about almost 4 years professionally now.
Okay, great. Well, let's define art therapy and what makes it different from just arts and crafts and art lessons that we go to. Can you explain that to myself and the audience?
Sure. So I get to ask that question all the time. And when I say I'm an art therapist, I usually get kind of a blank stare and a little nod with a smile. And I've had people ask if I heal paintings that are broken, or if I, I'm a therapist for artists. But art therapy is a discipline of therapy that incorporates the creative process into helping patients or clients reach their treatment goals, or progress in whichever way that they're looking to progress in a therapeutic setting. So it's really a combination of art and psychology. And if you are an art therapist, that means that you have your master's degree in art therapy or a kind of adjacent discipline. There's creative arts therapy programs, expressive arts therapy programs, but you have a master's degree, and we're trained as clinicians. We work as therapists, and I also am working towards my licensed mental health counselor license in Washington right now. So I work as a therapist. I just happen to use the creative process and art in many different forms instead of just words with my patients, clients, and residents.
Okay, great. Can you just define a little bit more for us the difference between creative arts and expressive arts?
There's not really that big of a difference. It's more semantics, but some programs choose to use the nomenclature creative arts therapies or expressive arts therapies, but that can include drama, dance, music, art therapy. There's some people who practice more specifically in one discipline over another, but there's also sections of the creative arts therapy world where people use many modalities. So you might combine dance movement therapy with drama therapy, or art therapy and music therapy together. So some people practice themselves in the overlap, or they co-lead groups with other creative arts therapists. It's really, kind of just depends on your modality. And then there's other people who practice specifically in one discipline, such as just visual art therapy, using drawing, painting, clay modeling, things like that.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's very helpful. So, how did you get into art therapy? And then how did you end up with Aegis Living?
So, I basically knew I wanted to be a therapist since I was very young. And I've always been an artist. I've always been artistically inclined. I love creating things. I love being playful and just using the creative process in all areas of my life. And when I went to college, I knew I wanted to study psychology, and I was in a program at NYU called the Gallatin School of Individualized Study, where you create your own major. So instead of, for example, going into college and becoming a business major, and then the school has a kind of a rubric of classes that you take in order to graduate with that major, we create our own rubric and choose from a variety of different courses and then graduate with our own new kind of area of study. So I created a concentration, is what it's called personal and social change through art. So I studied the different ways in which we can create change within ourselves and then interpersonally within communities or individuals, families, using art in the creative process. So during my time at NYU, I also took an intro to art therapy class during my undergrad time, and that was taught by a woman named Mary Grace Berberian. And she really was the one that inspired me to pursue art therapy on a master's level. And I ended up going and getting my master's from NYU as well in that art therapy program. And kind of the rest is history. I moved from New York to Washington about 2 years ago, and I was looking for a job. I kind of wanted a new start, someplace new, and I found a posting online from Aegis looking for a life enrichment assistant, and I applied and said, hey, these are my credentials. I have a master's in art therapy. I'd really love to work in one of your communities as an art therapist, and they trusted me and hired me, and I've been working at Callahan House ever since.
Okay, great. Well, that's a very interesting. I appreciate you sharing that with us. Can you tell us how you integrate the therapy into the daily lives of the residents who live at Callahan House?
Sure. So everybody who lives at Callahan House has a dementia diagnosis, and we incorporate therapy into their daily lives by kind of in two main ways, by having groups. So we have activities throughout the day that may or may not be specifically therapy groups. For example, in our mornings, we have our gratitude, and we do exercise, and we do social brain fitness, and we kind of get the residents awake and ready for the day and cognitively stimulated and all of those things. And that's part of the life enrichment program that Aegis has. And then I will also, later in the day, lead an art therapy group that is specifically structured as a therapeutic space. And I'll go into a little bit more about what that might look like. But then we also have what we call milieu therapy, where just myself and we have a music therapy intern being in the community, walking around, spending time with residents, looking for people who may be, emotionally dysregulated, having some trouble, feeling upset, feeling sad. We get to know their baseline, and when they seem that they may be off baseline, we'll go up, we'll say, hey, how are you doing? Kind of investigate what's going on, and then do milieu therapy, be that kind of comforting person in the space and help the residents that live here work through those difficult moments of their day and bring them back to a place that feels emotionally safe.
Okay. Now I have to ask, because I've not heard the word milieu before. Is that an Aegis term, or is that a therapeutic term, or?
It's a therapeutic term. It basically just means that the milieu is just the common space. So any place, the dining rooms, our activity spaces, the hallways, any place that's kind of common space in the building, I'll go walk around, see, what's what and who's feeling, different things throughout the day, and kind of just take an assessment of, how emotions are in the building and see what I need to do to help kind of bring people back to their baseline and into a comfortable area.
So you're assessing if someone's agitated or appears sad or lonely, or if they're, joyful and engaged. You're just picking up on all of those types of things that are happening. Okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the projects that you've done at Callahan House to utilize your art therapy? Can you give us some examples?
Sure. So I kind of have a very broad definition of art therapy in my work with memory care, because a lot of people are resistant to creating visual art like painting or drawing. Our educational systems, especially in the time when my residents were growing up, it was a very kind of cut and dry art education approach. So they would tell students, oh, that's not good art, or, oh, you're bad at drawing. And so my residents, who are 70 to 99 years old, have maybe heard their entire lives, like, oh, I'm not good at art. And then they come to me and I'm saying, hey, let's draw something. And they say, oh, I can't draw. I can't paint. Oh, no, I don't know how, I'm a bad artist. So I kind of open up my definition of art with them to try to bring them in, develop a relationship with them, and then we can bring in some of the more kind of traditional art forms. But for example, we started doing creative writing as a form of art therapy, and we did a self-published kind of zine/newspaper where the residents and I created, I think we have 7 editions of this zine that we published in-house and sent out to families, called the Callahan Community Chronicle, where we would have group discussions and come up with topics we wanted to share with the world, either with our families or with our peers. And we would have discussions, and I would kind of be the facilitator and transcribe quotes from residents, organize the kind of narrative structure of the articles as they would be in a newspaper, and then we published it. So we did, for example, an article on, you're never too old to learn. And we talked about how residents living at Callahan House are constantly learning new things. They're taking Spanish classes. We took sign language lessons. They're learning about new topics they've never heard of before. I've given a lecture on outer space, and that just because, they may be 85, 90 years old and they've never heard of, a musician named, Prince or whatever, they're never too old to learn, and they're gung-ho to bring in new knowledge and participate in that. And they wanted to share that with their families. Just because I'm older and I've lived my life a certain way for so many years, that doesn't mean I'm not interested in expanding my mind. So we incorporated creative writing and that creative process as a form of art therapy with the residents.
I love that. I love your tagline too, of never too old to learn. Because I think, there are stigmas and perceptions out there. And I'm just thinking, gosh, if I was a daughter of one of your residents, that would just make my day to be able to see something like that, or see that my mom or my dad was quoted, and active and engaged. That would just really warm my heart. So that's very cool.
Yeah, it's been a really fun project. And I think the residents enjoy it, for a lot of reasons. I think they just like being heard, feeling heard, being seen, and then also having help facilitating communication with their loved ones, because, when their family members may come to visit, you don't always have time or remember to have those conversations of things that you want to share with them, tell your children, communicate. And so for me to create and structure that space for them, and then make it concrete and be able to distribute it to their loved ones, I think that's like a really powerful communication tool for them. And it's also part of something we call legacy work in therapy with this population. It's also used in hospice care and end of life. But it's basically a way for the therapist to work with a client or resident to help them leave something behind, to create a legacy, to document and concretize what's important to them from their life. As you approach end of life, there's a lot of different feelings and conflicts and thoughts and emotions come up. And so I work with them to help kind of pull together all of those loose ends and make sure that they're able to communicate what they need to communicate in this very important period of their life.
Well, that is neat too. I'm going to jump back to the creative writing piece and the zine
Sure.
that you're doing, because the other thing that I think that does, besides making everybody feel good, is it will help. I would imagine it would help families have conversation when they visit. Because then
Yeah,
definitely that, and it's expanding their mind in terms of what we can even talk about and things. So that is really cool. And I love the gathering of the legacy and like you said, having something meaningful. And, you're having those hard conversations with their loved one that maybe they can't do, or that the person can't communicate with them about because, of their relationship and just how it's always been, or it might be too hard to let go. And you're that third party, that is facilitating, what's important that gets said, that they know. What have you learned that they might not communicate otherwise? And that is really a very, very cool piece as well. What kind of response have you gotten from families on both the creative writing and the legacy piece?
The response has been great. I think it's rare that when you know someone for that many years, for them to still surprise you in a pleasant way, especially with dementia. I feel like families get surprised a lot by either decline or change in behavior, and that can be kind of unsettling and difficult for family members. So for them to be able to read this zine and see, oh, this is what my mom talked about, or, oh, I can't believe she said that. I've never heard her say something like that before. It's kind of a nice little way for them to be pleasantly surprised by their loved ones. And the legacy work is very powerful because, as we know with dementia and cognitive decline, there's kind of these grieving stages that go in steps, and it can be quite a long and difficult process. So to have something concrete for the families to have and to hold on to, whether it's, the zine that we publish, whether it's their loved one's physical art that they create, it's a really powerful thing for people to hold on to.
Great. Now, you had mentioned kind of the physical artwork too, the coloring or painting and the clay. And I know with my own mom, people go, oh, they shouldn't color, that's childish and stuff. And yet nowadays we have all these adult coloring books because it's known to help calm people down and, do all these things. So can you talk about using some of the physical art projects that you have, and then maybe tell people how that can help somebody on a physical or emotional level, psychological level?
Yeah. So in general, in art therapy, we use drawing, painting, 3D modeling, like with clay, or there's something called model magic. That's a much cleaner way for people to sculpt. It's very light, and it doesn't have all of the kind of tactile difficulties that real ceramic clay might have. If you've ever done ceramics or pottery before, it can get very messy and can get very soft very quickly and kind of lose shape, and it can be difficult to work with, especially for people with motor function difficulties. So using alternate forms of modeling materials like model magic, clay, things like that can be really helpful. And then also doing collage. And with collage especially, it's one of my kind of favorite art forms to use with my residents because it's a combination. It's a combination of the creative artistic process of physically picking things up. I will help them glue them down if they need help. Sometimes they manage it all on their own, but it also allows for time to reminisce. So as they're looking through pictures, they draw associations. They may say, oh, this is my mom. And then it's, it might be an image from a magazine of a woman cooking in the kitchen. And so I'll say, oh, was your mom a good cook? And we go on to have a conversation about, meals cooked by their mother. or, a picture of the mountains. Oh, I used to be a hiker, and we'll talk about that. And it leads to conversation. And then also the physical act of creating art, putting lines on paper, putting colors together, it stimulates many different areas of the brain. It incorporates our visual perception. It incorporates our haptic perception, meaning our sense of touch. So as you pick up a piece of material, as you hold a piece of clay, all of those different things light up many, many different areas of the brain. So for people with dementia who have different neural networks that might be misfiring or malfunctioning or not working, or parts of the brain are decaying, we can activate alternate neural pathways and alternate neural networks by engaging all of these parts of the brain simultaneously that can, help reroute and kind of strengthen those alternate pathways. So by using all of the different senses present in art making. I mean, if you've ever painted with acrylic paint or tempera paint, there's a smell associated with it too. If you've ever opened a box of fresh crayons, there's certainly a smell there. A lot of people relate that, like you said, back to childhood. So it's really a multi-sensory process that helps stimulate the brain. And it's not only, the act of creating art can be very important, and we call that the process. So the way that you hold the marker, the way that you're putting marks on paper, painting with a paintbrush, that is very important. And then there's also the product, what you create, and that in and of itself can be important for the person participating in art therapy as well.
Okay. One of the things you had mentioned that I don't think people think about a whole lot is the touch and the feel of what it is they're doing, plus seeing something come alive. And so, they're just like when we're a baby, we might like at our first birthday party, getting our hands all gooey in the cake, and some others not so much, so we all react a little bit different to that. And that continues throughout our life. So I think it's really important, and, that you are really individualizing and looking at individual reactions to the different modalities that you're using, and understanding, even in doing a collage, if they can't use scissors, if they're ripping paper, I've been told over and over that can just be a real big stress releaser. There's so many different levels in terms of working with things, and doing the drawing or the painting, what comes alive. And we're seeing a lot of artwork being done by people with dementia that's pretty powerful. And I know as I go around the country, many of them are now starting to display personalized individuals' artwork, in their communities. And people are just shocked at seeing what they're able to do. Because I think, like you had mentioned, we're told, you're not good at that. So then we're like, okay, I'm not good at that. Nope. Anyone asks me, I'm not good at that. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to embarrass myself. And that's so ingrained. And yet, there's this overall philosophy of beauty is seen in the eyes of the beholder. And yet we have been taught it's good, it's bad, it's right. It's wrong. And being able to give people that chance. And as people progress too with with dementia, their symptoms will change and their filters change. So I know for my mom, she was much freer about that. Her ego didn't hold her back. She let go of some of those things she was taught and said, what the hey, I'm going to try it, And she wasn't scared anymore. She wasn't worried about being embarrassed. She just wanted to partake. She wanted to engage. She wanted to be part of the group. And in seeing those stages, as hard as it can be sometimes, to see somebody decline, there can be some really beautiful gifts wrapped in that progression as well that allows someone more freedom and more joy, because they're not worried about judging, because they don't judge anymore. That's just not part of who they are. When my daughter was really young, my mom would watch her for short periods of time, and literally I would come home I would not come home, but I would come to pick up my daughter, and I couldn't tell you who was prouder of their artwork. They'd be sitting at the table coloring. And, was it my 3-year-old or was it my mom? I mean, they were just having a ball. And, some people could look and go, oh, how sad. And I just looked at that and said, how beautiful. How beautiful to be so content and happy. And you could feel this joy, and you could feel the two of them, connect on a level that maybe we didn't do, because I wasn't that free to sit down and color. I had stuff to do. And I think as adults, we get wrapped up in that. So, teaching families how helpful that can be, how it can help calm somebody down and give them joy, and, let them express whatever they're feeling, or, maybe they're just gonna do something that's really dark and doesn't make a lot of sense, but maybe that's just an emotion they needed to get out. And
exactly,
you gave them a platform to do that. I think that's really, really powerful stuff that needs to be highly considered and utilized and leveraged in more communities. I think sometimes they're just looked at as tasks to fill a calendar, and they're not. People don't always look at the purpose behind them. I've talked with therapeutic rec or activity directors, or there's the life enrichment, many titles all around the country, and it's funny because I go, oh, where did the pictures go? I was told to take them down. They look too childish, and I'm like, do they know their audience? Do they know the joy this is brought? How proud they feel when they walk down the hall and see their artwork? But there's not.
Right.
There's this judging that goes on, even in some residential communities. There's not a thorough understanding and a focus on the joy, and it's such a great opportunity to be able to educate others. So if somebody makes a comment, you can get really excited about it and go, oh, no, you've got to come and watch when they're doing this. You need to see how this happens and how this makes people feel, because you can flip them on a dime if you show the passion, educate them in the process. So very exciting stuff. And I like, when you're talking about the collages too, I think those can be so surprising to many, because, collage doesn't have to be people and places and make sense. It could just be made out of colors and become a beautiful piece. There is no right or wrong with those things. And to make something out of clay, now you've got something solid, that can be displayed, it can be touched, it can be held. Do you display artwork and stuff in your communities?
I do. We have some artwork displayed in our activity room where we gather for most of our large group activities. So it becomes very familiar, and people can recognize their own artwork. And, one thing that I kind of like to point out when I'm talking to people about the art created in art therapy or the product is that sometimes people want it to be displayed and sometimes people don't. And sometimes they don't even want it to continue existing. And those are all valid reactions. And so for some residents, when they create and they have a sense of pride in the artwork and they want it to be displayed, they want to be able to revisit it and see it and have it continue to bring joy and show their family members, oh, this is what I created. We'll display those things. And I, always get the consent of the artist before putting it up in the community. And then sometimes they create something that's very intimate and very private and emotionally heavy. And I always ask after every art therapy group or session, what would you like me to do with your artwork? And I'll let them kind of answer open-endedly. And if they aren't sure, I give them 3 options. I say, well, would you like to keep it? Would you like me to hold on to it and keep it safe? Or would you like to let it go? And depending on what they've created, they make different choices. And sometimes they create something that's really emotional and really full of that kind of discharge of energy that they want me to destroy. They want me to throw it away. And sometimes that's okay. And we create just for creating, and we don't want to revisit the product. And, it's really up to the individual. But that's why, being an art therapist and giving people those choices is important, because we're able to help people move through the work that they've just done and figure out what they want to do with what they've created.
Well, that is a absolutely great point. And one that I hadn't even thought of. And, how dignified allowing them to have choice and say in things. It didn't even occur to me that somebody might create something that they would bring up too much emotion, or maybe they were just that type of person where, they didn't display stuff. Their life was really private, and that's a great point to add to this conversation, in terms of, again, it's you as a therapist really knowing your residents and knowing what it is they want and how to pull that out of them.
Can I give an example of a kind of a real life example of that experience?
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah.
So I had a resident who worked as an artist professionally throughout her career, and did art for personal reasons and for enjoyment throughout her life. And she was very engaged in art therapy and really, utilized the space to release her emotions. And one day we were in an art therapy group, and she was using watercolor and an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, and painted all over the page. And she yelled out, "I need another paper." And I said, okay. So I brought her another paper, and she dipped her paintbrush in the paint and got it really wet and made marks all over the paper, just really kind of this wild arm movements, and getting it on the table, and just all over deep orange and brown and red and some like muddy green colors, and just all over the paper. And then she says, "I need another one." And so I pulled over a chair, and I sat next to her with a stack of papers, and it was literally a revolving door. She just needed to paint and paint and paint. And the second she filled up the paper, she'd yell, "Next!" And then I'd swipe that one out of the way and put another paper there. And she painted about 9 paintings in, I don't know, maybe 15 minutes. And then finally she threw down her paintbrush and let out a big sigh and goes, "Oh, there. Oh, that feels better." And I said, "What was going on? What was going on during that artwork?" And she said, "Well, the world feels really scary right now, and I just had to get that out of me." And so I said, "Wow, thank you." And so I kind of laid them out, and we took a look at them, and I said, "Does this look like kind of scary artwork to you?" And she said, "Yeah." And she went on to describe the colors she used and the movements. And she said, "It just needed to be big and messy." And I said, "Well, that's great." I said, "What do you want to do with these?" And she said, "Burn them." I said, "Okay, well, I can't do that right now, but we can definitely get rid of these pieces of artwork if you need them to be gone from your life right now." And she said, "Okay." And she kind of let out this big sigh in her wheelchair and adjusted her glasses, and then gave me a really big smile. And that was kind of one of my favorite art therapy moments of working here. It was just such a pure example of someone having thoughts, feelings, emotions inside of them that they needed to get out. They couldn't talk about in words. And, the discharge onto the paper through their body movements and through the color was what she needed to kind of feel better about how scary the world felt to her that day.
Wow, that's a great story. Maybe we all need to paint, because there's a lot of people there saying the world's awful scary place right now, and they don't know what's going on. So, but that's a great example of using art to release emotions, and she was very aware of it, because she, that was her modality, and to communicate throughout her whole life. I think a lot of us wouldn't even know we're doing that necessarily.
Right.
And so then, it takes someone really paying attention to us in what's going on, or usually they use really bright colors, but today they're not. I mean, those are all messages to us to
Exactly.
just like with any artwork, it's up to us to interpret, and everybody sees things a little bit different, but it's a great way to, get a conversation going too. And a person with dementia may or may not remember or know why, it's just what they did. And that's okay too, because we've all been there, where we just did it because it was in front of us, and we were
Right.
thinking, because a lot of that stuff, I would imagine, is just really our unconscious at work.
Definitely. I mean, that's a huge part of what art therapy is. It's a way for our unconscious to be released, our subconscious to be released. And, a lot of people who engage in art therapy aren't, especially at the beginning stages, aren't ready to kind of actually verbalize and talk about really difficult things from their life. And art is a wonderful way for them to be able to communicate that without having to say it out loud or even, fully cognitively understand what they're working through. But a lot of the residents here, almost all of the men that live in the building are veterans. A lot of the residents grew up during World War II and have PTSD and have, traumas that have happened throughout their life that, especially back when they were young, 20-somethings serving in the Army, you didn't come home and share your feelings about the traumas you witnessed. You were a war hero and you went on with your life and you had a career and a family and, so on and so forth. And so for these people who, towards the end of their life, they're, kind of coping skills and the way that they've organized and contained their emotions for their entire life, some of those walls start to break down and things start to come up that maybe they haven't thought about since, 1945. And to have someone with dementia have a verbal conversation and work through, being in the war might not be the best approach. So I can work with these people and give them a way to communicate those things, to get them out, to work through them in some place other than within their own head. And that is where, the therapy really comes in of what are we working through? What do you need to communicate to me? Or what are you trying to work through in your own thoughts that might be causing disruption in your daily life and causing you to feel things that are uncomfortable, and how can we move through that?
So let me ask you this, when you're doing therapy, do you have a project of your own so that you're kind of setting the example, or, I would imagine probably some of it has to do with the level that somebody is at with their dementia. And what their symptom range is?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. And it really depends on the individual, not only the individual participating in therapy, but also the art therapist. And people practice in many different ways depending on the population. My approach with these residents is very eclectic, and it really depends on what they're needing. So I have some residents who, because of their dementia, may have paranoia coming up. And so if we're having a one-on-one session and I'm just sitting there watching them create art, that can cause, them to become uncomfortable or nervous or, wonder, why is this woman just staring at me while I draw on a paper, So if that's the case, I may, have the exact same materials they have, and we are creating art at the same time together. Sometimes I'll create my own piece of art. Sometimes we'll work on one together, but it depends on their comfort level. Other times I do not create anything in the space because they're very concerned about, will my art be good enough? Am I doing it right? And if I create something, they'll be comparing what they're doing to me. And then a lot of times with this population, because of their either like visuospatial abilities or physical impairments, they have arthritis, they can't grip a marker. I have to adapt the materials and assist them in the art making process. So for example, I had a resident I was working with who was in the end stages, excuse me, in the end stages of Alzheimer's, and was wheelchair bound, almost fully nonverbal, and had very, only gross motor skills available to them. So what we did was I taped a marker to a glove and had them wear the glove, and they just had to move their arm back and forth to get the marker to draw on the paper. So that's an example of adapting the tool for them. And then sometimes I actually will assist them, either placing my hand under their hand, or sometimes I'll use watercolors and I'll wet the whole paper so that the watercolors will bleed and blend. And I will dip the paintbrush in a color of their choice, put it in their hand, and then let them just tap the brush on the paper, and they'll see the color kind of bleed out, and we'll make abstract art that way. So my participation in the session really, really varies from person to person, and what that individual needs from me in the session to be successful in the work that they're doing.
And I love that you appreciate the way we can become conscious and kind of scared of someone else's judging if they're just looking over our shoulder. I think that happens with all of us throughout life. It's like, come on, leave me alone.
Yeah.
Let me do it. Or for others, it's really encouraging and supportive, and being able to read that and know what to do and come up with alternatives to make it a comfortable, pleasant experience. Well, I can't believe our hour is just about up. I want to make sure that we get this question in, and that is, why is it important to have therapists available in assisted living and memory care communities? What do you think is the true difference? I can list a whole bunch of them, but what do you think is the true difference in the need?
Well, I think what I kind of advocate and how I explain it to people is the residents living in assisted living and memory care are experiencing a really intense combination of life events and emotions and change all at once. And so they're approaching the end stage of their just individual development, right? The end stages of life, you reflect on your lifespan, what you've accomplished, whether you have regrets, your family, what you want to leave behind. So that in and of itself, for anybody approaching end of life, can be a very intense experience. It can be really moving and wonderful and full of gratitude and joy. It can also be full of lots of despair and frustration and sadness. So just in that respect alone, having therapists available to help people work through those difficult emotions is important. And then on top of that, as you experience with dementia, communication and connection changes. The way that you can recall words, the way that you've been able to communicate your whole life, for the most part, we use verbal language to communicate our needs, even if you're non-speaking or, deaf or blind, any of those things, you communicate in a particular way for most of your life. And then as dementia progresses, you may lose your ability to communicate in the same way you always have. So to have people who can offer alternative modes of communication, whether that be a music therapist or an art therapist or a dance movement therapist, drama therapy, giving people as many resources and as many tools as possible to maintain their ability to connect to other humans is so important, because we know that as you approach end of life, as your physical abilities, cognitive abilities decline, isolation, depression, despair can really take a toll, not just emotionally, but all of those things have physical repercussions as well. So having people available constantly in the community who the residents trust, who they know, people who live here know where my office is, and they come and they knock on my door if they're having a hard time. They know I'm a safe person. They know that I'm a comforting human in the building, and they might not know I'm a therapist, but they know, oh, this, person makes me feel better, or this is a safe space to go cry. That's a very important thing. So we're not just helping people with end of life challenges. We're helping people communicate when they've maybe lost that ability in alternate forms. And I think that that's really, really important.
I so agree. I so agree. Well, I can't thank you enough for your time with us today. This has been really enlightening, and I would imagine our audience is going to just love this as well, and hopefully be able to look at art a little bit differently, that it's not just fluff. There's really purpose and a substance to it, much deeper, that can help us all live better and enjoy and release emotions, which in the world today is a difficult thing for people to do. Everybody's stuffing their emotions, and so and things come out sideways. So I think that I think therapy is a great program, and I agree it should be in every assisted living, and it should be in every memory care. And education needs to get out to not only the staff, but I think the families, to understand the purpose of it on a deeper level. Now, people can get a hold of you via phone at 206-452-0285. That's 206-452-0285. Or they can email you directly at Jael Weinberg at aegisliving.com, and that's JAEL dot, and then Weinberg, WEINBERG at Aegis Living, and Aegis is AEGISLIVING.com. And if you're interested in looking at other Aegis communities, because they've got quite a few of them, you can go to aegisliving.com for more information there. Thank you again so much for being with us, Jael. I really appreciate the time that you took with us to share your expertise.
Thank you, Lori. I'm so grateful to have a platform to talk about, this passion that I have for bringing art therapy and creative expression, to this population. And I encourage people to reach out if they have more questions. There's so much to say. It's so hard to fit, such a broad topic and such an entire discipline into an hour. But if people have questions or comments or, they want to communicate further, please reach out to me. I'd love to continue the conversation.
Great. Thank you so much. In wrapping up here, I just want to give a shout out to the Alzheimer's Research and Prevention Foundation. They do a wonderful job from a holistic approach. So if you're into diet and exercise and meditation, please visit the alzheimersprevention.org, alzheimersprevention.org. And then Calendar Cards has a great memory system that helps people continue to be independent. And Dave, the owner, was so kind. He also created the Memory Cafe directory. So now you can find where one of over 500 memory cafes are in the nation. This is really exciting. And he's starting to develop directories for other countries as well, because the need is so great. So if you're looking for a memory cafe, please go to memorycafedirectory.com. That's memorycafedirectory.com. Or maybe you have a memory cafe and you want to get into the directory, just reach out to Dave through that website, and he is more than happy to add you to the Memory Cafe directory. So thank you all so much for joining us, and please don't forget to share and like and spread the word of this program, because I think more people need to understand on a deeper level the benefits of art therapy. Thank you again, everyone. Bye now.
It's time to rethink, renew, and reimagine retirement. Hey everybody, Jared Sylvester here, host of Retire Repurposed. Now, this podcast is about the non-financial parts of retirement, which many times can be even more challenging than the financial. We believe retirement is not the end, rather the beginning of what could be the most impactful, purposeful, and fulfilling season of a person's life. So don't retire, become repurposed. To listen now, search Retire Repurposed on your favorite podcast platform, Senior Resource, or Life Audio.